The following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do, all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lainey Liberty, and this is episode number 15. The theme of tonight's episode is home education in Europe. Why is it important to take on the topic of home education in Europe? Is not home education in any country? Are there special circumstances that need to be considered? Throughout Europe and the UK, many choose to teach their children at home. But in some countries, there are other considerations outside children learning at home. Some countries have highly regulated home education programs as an extension of the compulsory school system. Others, such as Germany, have outlawed it entirely. In other countries, while not restricted by law, homeschooling is not socially acceptable. Today, we're going to speak with a panel who are all advocates for the home education movement within Europe and the UK. I'm going to give a brief introduction to each of our panelists, then we'll start the conversation. Although these introductions are brief, we have more information about each of our panelists on the show notes page located at consciousconsumernetwork.tv, and look for the show notes page for episode number 15. There you will find more extensive information about their backgrounds and links to each of their projects, books, and websites. So let's jump right in. First, let's meet Stephanie. Stephanie has been involved in the home education movement since 2003. She has organized local home ed meetings for many years and has participated in home education conferences, meetings, and forums in over 11 countries. Stephanie is an advocate of natural learning and often lectures on the subject. Stephanie is speaking to us live today from Germany. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, Lainey. I'm really thrilled to be on this panel today. I'd like to preface everything I'm saying, though, with a caveat, because English is not my native language. So I might go hunting for words, or I might express myself in peculiar ways. So please excuse me right now. Thank you.
Absolutely no worries. We are so thrilled that you're here with us to share your insights and your stories. Next, let's meet Leslie. Leslie is a mother of 2 children, aged 26 and 31, who have never been to school. She is very active in the home education community in the UK and helped found Otherwise Club, a community center for home educators in central London in 1993. Leslie received her PhD focused on home education and its long-term effects on home educating parents. She speaks and writes widely on the topic. Welcome, Leslie.
Hi, Lainey. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. And I'm so excited to learn more about your experience and projects. But first, let's meet Alan. Alan is a developmental psychologist with a long-standing interest in how children learn. He began researching home education at the Charles Darwin University, Australia, and is currently associated with UCL Institute of Education in London. Alan's research focuses on unschooling or autonomous and informal learning. Alan has written a number of books, and the most recent one being How Children Learn at Home. His new research deals with home-educated children learning to read without being taught, which is at this moment the only comprehensive research exploring how children learn in a way which confronts nearly everything that professional educators believe to be essential for learning to take place. Welcome, Alan. So happy to speak with you today.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here. Just to say that for a long time, I was not an advocate of home education. I was somebody who was researching it, and I still think some kids like school until my grandson is being home educated, and I am an advocate of home education.
Well, that's a really unique position to come from. I'd like to know what led you into not only researching how we learn, but incorporating that into your position about home education. Could you share a little bit of your background with us?
Yeah, sure. I've always been interested in how children learn, and I felt there was something, without going on story, there was something wrong with schooling. I always felt as a child in school, I felt a lot of time was wasted, and I felt that there should be something much more, that education, learning could be much simpler and much more intensive. So I thought, well, there's something really wrong with the system. So I thought, well, what can I do? So I researched everybody, all the old philosophers, John Dewey in America, Rousseau in France, and so on. And they all seem to have individual teaching, not natural. I hadn't heard of natural learning then. And so I wrote an article for the Oxford Review of Education on individualized teaching. And I thought I'd found the answer. The only way a child can learn is if you teach individually. You can't relate to children at the same time. And then I met somebody that I got to know very well, Roland Meehan, who was at Birmingham University. And when he found out, I thought he'd like my article, but he wasn't that keen on it. And he said, well, why don't you go and, he said, by chance, a letter here from a home educator who's offered to have a student living in for a week. So would you like to be that student? So at my mid-50s, I became a student, and I stayed with this family for a week. And very nervous. Sunday night, we all had dinner. We were all quite nervous. Monday morning, I came down early with my club, ready to note down what was going on. And nothing much happened. No children, nothing. So I went back up to my room, cleaned my teeth again, and came back down and waited for something to happen. Eventually, one of the two children came downstairs, straight past me reading a book, and then his sister came down and started chatting to her mother, and then we had breakfast, and I thought, right, this is where we start. So I get ready with my clipboard. Again, to cut a long story short, at the end of the week, I'd filled about half a page of my clipboard and nothing more. In other words, nothing seemed much to happen. And I thought, well, I kept on asking, are you going to do any teaching? And he said, maybe in a day or two, said the mother, just wait a bit. So I waited and nothing happened. And then on about the Wednesday, I had my epiphany moment, because we were all sitting around the kitchen table and the conversation started moving around. Covered all sorts, like, can we have special donuts for tea? But also at that time, apartheid was in the So we talked apartheid, talked about all sorts of topics. Some would be thought of as quite academic, some were just day-to-day living. And then I realized how much learning there could be, how much learning could be acquired informally. And so that's how I became fascinated by home education. And then I began to do my research.
It got more and more. I find that often we're quite alone with this this way of educating the children, or letting the children learn for themselves from life, whatever they're interested in. So, and maybe even more so than in the US, in Germany, where it's actually, we have compulsory schooling laws, so it's actually not really an option not to go to school. So what I started a few years back is just having regular meetings once a month for families who are interested in this, or who want to find ways to do it in spite of the schooling laws. And well, our most recent development is that my son and I have developed a website that will probably also be on the show website, which is a community that's been online for less than a month. And it's sort of a kind of home education in little Facebook. So you can log in, you can find other home educators. There's a home education map where people can sign in and see where in my country, or where in my neighborhood even, are other home educators. There's within less than a month, we have 338 members on there for now. And they live in 18 different countries. So it's based in Germany, but it's supposed to be the whole world. And I collect home education events on there. There's a forum, there's a chat function, so you can come in and meet people there.
It sounds like an incredible resource, and a very well-needed resource, especially in Germany, where there seems to be a lack of resources. I want to shift gears a little bit and jump back over to Alan. Stephanie brought up community in learning, and one of the things that you said in your introduction was you believed that a class full of kids had no ability to learn because learning needed to be individualized. Do you feel in your research that there is a way of defining education and learning that could happen in all of these different circumstances, in community, individually, informally, and even formally? What's your feeling about the actual act of learning and what needs to go into it in order to make it learning?
Well, that's a good lead-in to my to my first research. After my epiphany moment, so to speak, I thought, well, this is a topic that must be researched. So I set about interviewing 100 families. The very first one was Leslie. And then a lot of families, mainly in Tasmania, in Australia, and in the UK, and living in with some of them and observe. And these families spanned everything from more like school than school. One mum had a bell that she rang at 9 o'clock in the morning when the lessons started, and she had lessons planned throughout the day. Sorry, I'm just being, lessons planned throughout the day, to others at the other extreme, whereas one mum said, we get up on Monday morning and we end up in the supermarket on Friday, and I don't know what happens in between. So the whole between that, all possibilities. And I learned to respect them all. Some of the formal, when I analysed more formal learning at home, even that is very different from school. It tends to be intensive because when you get on with it, you get on with it. There's no messing around as there is in school. There's no administration and so on. And also, lessons can be at any time. They can go on for as long as you like, short as you like. If it's a nice day, you go out. You're not going to do any work. So that's even at the formal end, and that's very, very different. Then there's the middle group, if you like, who they're hedging their bets. They're maybe a bit of formal learning in the morning, and then that's it. And as one parent put it, we try to do an hour or so every day, but we are lucky if we can manage that. So what I found for the whole 100 was the movement from formal to informal to some extent. Some stayed fairly formal, and if that, when people ask me what advice, how to go about it, I say, follow your nose. Whatever you think works with your children, that's the best for you. But as a researcher, I'm obviously interested in the informal, autonomous, unschooling end. That's what I find very fascinating. And my research is really analysing what that is all about. Leslie. Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in to say sometimes I think there's a misunderstanding about informal learning as well, that it always looks like life. And that's not true. For me, it's also about, it's people following, it's self-motivation. So sometimes it can look like school, so that doesn't mean it's not informal learning. So it's if a person wants to study French and they get a French textbook and they sit with this one and they learn French, and people would come in and say, oh, whoa, see, they're not informal learning. They've got, they're following this curriculum and so on. You say, yes, but the big difference is they've chosen to do that. And they know why they're doing that. And they're struggling through doing that themselves. So it's quite a complicated, the sort of informal formal is quite a complicated, which, Alan knows all this too. It seems like it's a simple two things, but actually it's quite complicated.
Yes, that's spot on, actually. And that's something that's bothered me, because the autonomous side of it is you can go formal because you choose to do so. Or even as some of the children I've come across, they say they'd like to go to school. And when they go to school, one of them said, my friend said, aha, so you finally decided to come to school. And I said, but I don't have to be here. And that's the big difference, I think, because you autonomously had decided to go to school. But yes, I think I'm talking mainly about younger children, where it's, of course, younger children can follow their own interests as well. But I think the kind of research that I'm doing is typical of developmental psychology, which eventually catches up with what everybody knows. At least in this case, it's what all informal home educators know. And it's very, all parents are informal home educators if you think of the first 4 or 5 years of life. Nobody teaches, you can't teach young children. You can't sit a child on the table and say, right, nouns today, or adjectives today, or we're going to do maths today. You can't do that with a 2 or 3-year-old. No way you do that. They conduct their own learning and very, very good at it. So yes, Leslie, but that has been a problem for us throughout if you decide if you're following an interest, you're following something sequential, but at the same time, you're picking up a lot that is completely without you knowing it, or through other activities, such as cooking, for example. In cooking, you get maths, you get nutrition, you get all sorts of things. So you can pick up stuff like that, but then there comes a point where you follow your interests. So yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And I think everybody on this panel really is coming at home education from the unschooling or the autodidactic perspective. So, Stephanie, could you share with us a little bit about some of the challenges and obstacles somebody may face home educating in a place where it's not as accepted, like Germany?
Well, yeah, the thing is, in Germany, we have a law that says that schooling is compulsory. So everybody has to go to school. But actually, there's a controversy also about how our constitution and the schooling laws are to be interpreted. There's a doctoral thesis that has been published in 2012 that actually analyzes the whole complex of compulsory schooling. And he comes to the conclusion that there should at least be exemptions possible from the rule that every child has to go to school. So yeah, there might be possibilities that it might change over the next years. But in spite of these compulsory schooling laws that we have, Germany actually does have quite an active and growing homeschooling or home education community. And we have quite a good infrastructure that has been built up over the past 10, 15 years. There's a big, or the biggest, most active home education association is called BVNL. That's Bundesverband Natürlich Lernen, which would translate to something like Federal Association of Natural Learning. That was founded in 2002, so it's been around for a while. And they deliver information about home education on their website. They send out a newsletter. They support home educators on a phone line. They organize talks and get-togethers. For example, they also have this brochure that they give out. So there's about 12 pages of information. What is home education? Educating people about it. And most lately, they have also done court case trainings because people get into trouble with the law. And so they train people to get more confident in the encounters with the school authorities and if they have to go to court. So they train the families. Then they also publish a magazine that is published, I think, every 2 or 3 months, the Home Educators magazine. And we also have several other organizations. There's one that's called Freilerner Solidargemeinschaft, which would translate to Home Educators Solidarity Fund, something like that. So they are a fund, they were founded in 2012, and they're a fund in order to support people if families get in problems with the court, and they have to pay fees for the lawyers. So they collect money and help the families, support them financially. And they also create a network of lawyers that are willing to represent families in court if they're in trouble for not sending their kids or not forcing their kids into school. Because often what happens is it's not the parents that decide, okay, I think this is a very good idea of education, I won't send my kids to school. Because in Germany, you will run probably into trouble. But often it's just the kids. It's the kids that school doesn't do them much good. Some kids just don't do well in school and they suffer. And the parents don't know what else to do because they can't watch their kids suffering any longer. So it's the kids who say, no, I'm not going anymore. I can't bear it anymore. So yeah, we have that fund that helps families. What we also have is a youth group that has been around since 2008. So a few home educated youth and young people get together once or twice a year for a week, and they just hang out and they cook together and they play games or soccer or the guitar, whatever strikes their fancy. And actually this group of youth, it's called Septembertreffen, because their meetings were always in September. So that's the name of the group. And they're the driving force behind the Schulfrei Festival that we have. It's been, they organized the first one in 2013. So this year will be the third year. It's a festival. We had almost 500 people attending last year. And there's conference talks about home education. There's workshops for crafty workshops. And then there's live music in the evenings. And a lot of socializing going on during the days. And both Ellen and Leslie have been last year and the year before. So yeah, people sometimes ask me when I talked about the Schulfrei Festival in a conference in Oslo last year, people said, oh, but I thought you all have to hide and there's no home education whatsoever in Germany. And I had all these pictures of people camping out and having loads of fun. And they said, oh, doesn't the police come and arrest you all? And I said, no, actually, there is an active home education community in Germany. It's not always easy, but it's alive and growing a lot.
That's so inspirational to hear. Do you have any thoughts on why the laws are as strict as they are? Do you have any ideas or any thoughts about that?
I don't really know why it's never been changed. I just, before I always thought, okay, the situation in Europe is this. You can't home educate in Germany, and now also since 2009 in Sweden, and all the other countries you can. But I don't think it's that black and white, because in many other countries also there's a lot of rules that you have to listen to. For example, in Austria, you have to do yearly testing, or in France, you have controls. Like every country has their different, or for example, in Spain, it's sort of, it's not legally allowed, but it's also not illegal. It's also not, yeah, so I don't think it's that black and white that Germany and Sweden are the only countries where you can't home educate, and in all other countries you can. That's just not the case.
Yeah, and it seems we have the same issues in the United States, but it's based on the individual states as well. So there's different rules for different states. I was wondering if there were any obstacles or issues that those in the UK are facing, and I'll put that to our panel. Leslie and Alan, did you have any thoughts on any of the obstacles that are more challenging in the UK?
Yes, I mean, I'd like to, sorry, Alan, I'm jumping, reiterate what Steph said about it isn't black and white. Some places it's illegal and there are no home educators. In other places it's legal and there are lots. I think of all the European countries, Britain, or England and Wales, I should say, has the most open laws about home education. But despite that, we are also under attack. I mean, in my experience, it's the British law comes from a very different place, sort of Celtic, different traditions than countries which had Napoleonic code, where the state has a different relationship to its citizens and so on. So there's some of that in it. There's also Germany's particular history. I think seems to be a great fear of what they call parallel societies, and that's happening all over. Now with the great Muslim, the Islamophobia sort of being held up, that people are doing things in secret underground, and Germany is very sensitive to that. I mean, in the UK, enshrined in the first law, where every child it was a compulsory education, 1944, and that was taken over to the 1996 Act, says that every child shall receive an education at school or otherwise. It's the otherwise, so there's education otherwise, and we are the otherwise club. So that funny word is used because it relates to the Section 7 of the Education Act.
Not everyone is aware that home education is a legal alternative to school in many countries around the world. The 1996 Education Act for England and Wales states that the parent of every child of compulsory school age shall cause him to receive efficient full-time education suitable to his age, ability and aptitude, and any special educational needs he may have, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. Most parents delegate this responsibility to a school, but an increasing number of families are choosing to educate their children otherwise through home education. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to be a qualified teacher to home educate. Learning to walk and talk was a natural process for your child, achieved without the need for any lesson plans. With home education, the parent simply continues in this role of facilitator to the child. There are many different reasons for a child to be educated at home. Some parents deregister their child from school because of issues such as bullying, special educational needs not being met, over-testing, or a general dissatisfaction with the state system. Other families, however, made the decision to home educate at the beginning and have never sent their child to school.
When we first started home educating, as an educator myself, we had timetables and I wanted to follow a curriculum, which I thought was the correct way of going about it. But in actual fact, I realised that it wasn't what my daughters needed. The freedom of not having a curriculum is immense, and it makes them happier when they can choose what they want to learn and they go with it. And they might go with a particular subject for 2 or 3 weeks, whereas in a school they're limited by, an hour here and an hour there, and they can't grow with it. I think home education opens a lot of doors for children.
Home education to me now is giving me a lot of time for what I want to do when I'm older. And when I was at school, I didn't have a lot of time for what I wanted to do when I'm older. And I love art. And when I am at home, I can do art whenever I want, and I can freely do what I want. At school, there's always rules and regulations, and I didn't have a lot of time to do what I really wanted, and I absolutely love art, and this differs from school and at home, where I can go and free myself and learn whatever I want and learn how much I want. With school, it's lines and you've got to do this at this time, so home education's just amazing.
Just as there are many different reasons behind choosing home education, there are a variety of ways in which families approach home education. For every child, the experience is unique, just as every child is unique.
Well, ever since day one, because of my hair, I've been really badly bullied. And what happened is, I sort of started to put up with it, but after a while it sort of edges away at the sort of toughness you've built up, and then suddenly you just can't take it anymore. So I kept telling the school, I'm being bullied, what are you going to do about it? They gave me detention, next day back where we started again. So I rang my mum up after I left school that day and said, Mum, I really can't hack this anymore, it's not working, nobody's going to do anything about it, and if I try and do something about it, they're going to have a go at me. So me and my mum both decided together, why don't we try home education?
Within this broad spectrum of personalised learning, there are, however, common themes and approaches. One of these approaches is autonomous or informal learning. You and your child decide what, when, where and how to study, and use individual interests and natural curiosity as a starting point.
I suppose my life differs from those of the school children because I was educated autonomously, meaning that one day was never the same as the next. And I spent a large amount of time working at a local riding school and at home educated meetings, which I feel provided a far more diverse social background than if I was just with my age group in school.
Well, it's not really been structured like a school. I try and impose some kind of structure, like going and doing maths once a week and stuff, because I have a friend who teaches me maths, but in principle it's been kind of self-guided.
Other learning styles may be more structured in their approach. This may include using a timetable or lesson plans, and families may use a curriculum based on traditional school subjects, or one tailored to their particular aims. Even within a structured approach, home education provides a freedom and a depth that is not reflected in the state system.
Some children at home learn through structured methods with a curriculum and so on. Even then it's very different from school because it's one-to-one. There's very little in the way of failure because children, if they've got a problem, then they deal with it there and then. So there's no marking and testing and moving on. There's no waste of time. It's very intensive, which means that it can be usually confined to about an hour or two in the morning. That's if it's structured. And the rest of the day is free for other activities.
Whatever approach you choose, you can swap from one to the other. Home education allows your ideas to change and grow with the child. This is personalised learning. Remember, in law, the responsibility for your child's education is yours, not the school's and not the local authorities.
And so in British law, in primary law, parents are responsible for their children's education at school or otherwise. So it's the parent's responsibility. But given the fear sort of societies that we're living in, particularly since 2001 and so on, parents are being undermined, their rights and their responsibilities towards our lives as citizens are being undermined in so many different ways. And this, in the UK, is one of the few areas left where parents are the prime responsibility for education rather than the state. So in terms of child welfare, for example, the state has more power over the child than the parent, and the state can step in and take the child away for a huge variety of reasons. But in 2009, the last Labour government, we were really attacked by a chap called Bad Man, which is his actual name. People think that we're calling him a name, but we're not. That is his name, Graham Badman. And he wrote this report in which he alleged that home-educated children were twice as likely to be abused as non-children. And actually, when he was giving this as evidence, the panel in the Houses of Parliament called him up and said that he'd made a mistake in his statistical analysis, which he had, and actually they were half as likely. But he still carries on as if home education is a social services problem, so that children are more at risk. And there have been some cases where home-educated children were involved, but all of those cases were well known to the authorities. So it's been shown that it was the authorities were not protecting the children well enough. The home education community rallied in the most remarkable way to this attack by Badman. So he was proposing not to change the law, so parents would still be responsible for their children's education, but he was proposing that the local authority, this kind of city, the small state structures, would have to agree to the home education once they'd seen the curriculum that was going to be presented that year. This would be an annual agreement, and then they would have to check that curriculum had been delivered. Due to the pressure and the tremendous work of the home education community, we managed to get two of the political parties on our side. So fortunately, an election was called, and through all kinds of strategy and tactics, these two paragraphs that referred to home education were taken out of the bill, and the bill was passed without them. So this didn't go through, but many of the local authorities, this local government, they are behaving as if it did go through. And they see home education as a threat, and they feel that these children, are, in some ways, they're confusing social care issues with education issues, and they're not following the law. And they insist on. We're just having a huge battle here in central London at the moment, where they're insisting on home visits, and they want to see the work that the children have done, and they want to see the child. And only if they have evidence that no education is happening are they allowed to act in law, but they are acting outside the law. And we are finding that there's no accountability. I mean, we keep taking them to different layers, and the different layers of the legal situation say, well, my goodness, you mean children don't have to go to school? This is terrible. Oh, God, you're there to protect. You're supposed to be defending us, protecting us. This is the law of the land, but they're not doing it. So the whole culture has really dramatically changed. And we're quite worried that if the Labour government get in May, we're having an election in May, they will come after home education again and regulate it, is what they call it.
So that sounds like really incredible obstacles to be facing. I'm glad, some of that was thwarted throughout the way, but in the projected future, there may be some problems. Is there a statewide definition of what constitutes education? Because if they're going to go in and regulate it, it's got to be defined somewhere. What is the definition of education according to the state?
It is defined in law as equipping a child suitable to its age, aptitude, and ability for the society into which it lives, it grows. But how you do that is very subjective. So I don't think, there haven't been cases that I've seen where home educators, the problem is that you have to prove. I mean, as you know, as an unschooler or an autonomous educator, there isn't a lot on paper. We know how the kids are doing, the friends know how the kids are doing. You can see if something's wrong, young people come up and say, I'm not happy with this, or I want more of that, then you deal with it. But whether they don't sit down every day and write stuff out and work through books and so on, stuff that you would show to a third party to be able to say, look, here's how they're doing. We don't need to do that. We know, very intimately how our young people are doing. So it often happens when the authorities come along, you haven't got anything to show them. And when you say everything's okay, also you haven't got it structured into these arbitrary subject headings. You do, like we did a very big project on the mountain gorillas. We did geography, we did science, we did languages, we did zoology. We've done a lot of subject matter, but it wasn't structured like that. It was a project work. So the authorities are saying, well, what about languages? Where is the sports here? He has to do 2 hours of sports a week. And you think, well, it's a different system. It's a different road we're traveling on. It's a very efficient, very productive road, but it doesn't fit into your tick box mentality. And many of the people who are working in these jobs they just want their boxes ticked. They're not really that interested in how the child is doing. So this is the sort of thing we're facing, and of course, when you say people don't go to school and I can't tell you what they're learning, Joe Public says, oh my God, these children aren't learning anything and it's terrible and they're just having fun. And, as we said earlier, learning has to be hard and difficult and not fun. Otherwise, it's not learning. It says the prejudices are fed more and more. Saying that, if I can sort of go on, the thing that the 2009 Badman review did was actually publicize home education to an enormous extent, such that I think it slightly backfired because the numbers have been growing hugely since 2009. And this is a good and bad again as well, because a lot of the people who are home educating now are doing it as a kind of, this is also coupled with the fact that the education system, the state education system, is failing dramatically. So people are not finding schools that they want their kids to go to. So they're home educating, but they're home educating in a way that, I agree with Alan that they may become more informal as they go along, but they're very much seeing school as the model. So they get tutors. It's a very, more of a kind of private school kind of style of home educating. In fact, there was just an article about Emma Thompson, the actress, has started home educating her daughter, and she's employing tutors and they're doing exams. So it's very, very modeled on school. And the more autonomous educators are finding they're being swamped by the numbers of these new kind of lifestyle home educators, I would call them, which is good and bad, because if the authorities do come after us, there will be bigger numbers. But these new home educators will not be so, they don't understand why we don't want the authorities to come to our homes. They say, well, we do maths on Monday from 9 till 10, and then we go swimming, and then we do cello, and then we do, so that's fine. They can come to our homes. But what they're actually doing for us is giving up the possibility of other equally effective forms of education that don't look like school.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider there. I want to ask Alan, is the idea or the definition of education and learning, the whole concept, is that shifting in the world of academics among other PhDs, or do you have to, or have you had to educate them as to what learning looks like from a self-directed perspective?
Yeah, two things there, I think. One is that nearly all the research in education, mountains and mountains and mountains of it, in journals and books, is all to do with learning in school. And so the schooling becomes the yardstick against which everything's measured. And but that's how it is, I'm afraid. And I've tried to, it's become the yardstick. It's not scientific. It's totally unscientific to say that because a lot of people do one thing, that it's necessarily right. And bloodletting years ago was a popular medical thing to do because nearly everybody did it. They all did it. It's not quite like bloodletting, but it's the same idea that we know best because this is what's been going on for the vast majority of people. I think it's also that professionals are reluctant. They've spent years studying. They've been teaching in schools, or they advise teachers in schools, or they inspect teachers in schools, or they're academics who've come through the school system. They don't want people telling them you're doing not much point in it. I was at a dinner the other day, and there was a head of primary school who just retired, and I explained what my research was about, and he got very angry. He said, "Do you mean to tell me that I've wasted all my life doing this work in schools?" And I said, "Oh, no, not of course, but there's a different way of learning, and you can maybe come to appreciate it." But as I was saying, it's mainly it's unscientific to say that one group can, from experience, can therefore determine what another group does. I've given talks to groups of academics at the university where I'm, and my colleagues come along and they listen politely and they say, "Oh, very interesting, Alan," and then off they go, do their research on, is it better for children to learn in desks in front or in groups around? They do around, little groups within the classroom, or is it better to teach phonics for reading, or is it better to teach look and say methods reading? They don't want to really know about it because they don't see it as relevant to their own work. And it's a matter of power too, I think, that they want the politicians and so on, they want the power. And one politician recently said at a meeting that I was at, home education, as Leslie said, is growing massively. We'll have to do something about it. In other words, there's something inherently wrong with it, and home educators have to be tamed and brought into the fold.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, what you're implying is the education process is somewhat political. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Hey, hey, sueña como un niño, leré. Sueña como un niño. Vuela, la vida es una y vuela. Hey, hey, sueña como un niño, leré. La vida es. Vuela, la vida es una y vuela. Hey, hey, sueña como un niño, leré. Vuela, la vida es una y vuela. Hey, hey, sueña como un niño, leré. Ay, yo me muero en la tierra del fuego, que queda luego, soñando en un mundo sincero. Me arrodilla cerquita del suelo, sus vergüenzas no tienen consuelo, y yo quiero tocar el cielo y sin miedo avanzar. Vola a soñar pero sin peros, como un río desbordado, aunque sigue la corriente, anhela llegar al mar. Ay, yo me muero en la tierra del fuego, que queda luego, como acaba la historia del miedo, donde la luna y el sol ya no bailan junto al mar, desde el monte al horizonte, donde juega el día y la noche a quitarse el despertar, donde hallo la fuerza más pura que jura avanzar, caminando se halla la frescura de amar. Ey, ey, sueña como un niño, leré. Vuela, la vida es una y vuela. Ey, ey, sueña como un niño, leré. Vuela, la vida es una y vuela. ¿Y en qué momento me abandonó la sonrisa por la razón que en su caparazón me guarda? Y a sus andares de rostros sin malabares, grandes remedios a grandes males, que la vida es para disfrutarla. Y ahora yo llevo rumbo de canto y color, de flores canviat per art de màgia, que han canviat per art de màgia. No és tan fàcil deixar-se emportar pel vent quan bufa fort com sentiments que han canviat per art de màgia, que han canviat per art de màgia. Tot és diferent i ara el sol surt a ponent, ha canviat per art de màgia. Les mentides són veritat quan les porta el vent. Si ara el sol es pon al mar, buscaré cants de sirena, temptaré a la gravetat. Vola molt amunt, se m'emporta un sentiment, ha canviat per art de màgia. Les mentides són veritat quan les porta el vent. Si ara el sol es pon al mar, buscaré cants de sirena fins que el sol torni a escalfar. Fàcil deixar-se emportar pel vent quan bufa fort com sentiments que han canviat per art de màgia, que han canviat per art de màgia.
Okay, and we're back. Now that was a really interesting video, and I'm going to jump on over to Stephanie so you can share with us just a little bit about what it is that we just saw. So Stephanie?
Yeah, those were pictures and impressions from a conference that I went to in for Easter in 2013. It was a Spanish home education meeting, and it also hosted the 2013 TENHI meeting. TENHI means the European Network of Home Education, which under that name we founded in January 2012, or we coined that term. But actually networking within Europe has been going on for quite a while, but I think Leslie can say more about that.
Yes, we were lucky enough to have a very big festival of home education here in England's called HESFest, Home Education. It was Seaside, now it's Home Education Summer Festival. And that's been going, maybe since 95 or something like that. And as it grew every summer, it's camping, and it started off in Devon on a beautiful campsite, and there were houses, for small houses you could rent as well, and people were coming from all over Europe. In Poland, Marek turned up. It was amazing. He'd done this 72-hour coach trip. He just turned, I'm from Poland and I'm a home educator. Wow, fantastic. That was about 2000. So we started to feel that. And I was running a conference within the festival. So every day we would have speakers like Alan or Roland Meehan, or speakers who were working on both educational issues and home education and parenting issues. And Europe was becoming it was becoming apparent as we were getting lots and lots of people from Europe that we could start discussing that. So 2001 we formed a group using Roland Meehan's title, Learning Unlimited. And this has mainly been a website and online group to talk to people. So people could use it for both help with legal issues, but also exchanging if young people wanted to come to England, or people wanted to go to France, or we can meet each other. We tell each other, when we have internal festivals like in France, there's been a fantastic exchange of resources. And in 2005, through this, so every year at HESFest, we would have one day of the conference would be for Learning Unlimited and for the European issues. And we would have regularly 8 to 10 European countries represented there, which was amazing. We'd hear the stories of what's happening in each country and, how much we could support each other. So we also published a book. in 2005 in 3 languages, French, German, and English, which was Alan's lecture and Roland Meehan's lecture is part of the book in the first half as kind of academic and analysis part. And then we also have there was 3 countries that we talked to home educators. They were piped into the field, which was quite amazing in 2005 to have that technology. So from France, Switzerland, and Germany, we had home educators. And then their talk about their situation is in the book. And then we had different people talk at the end. It was a more practical people telling how they did it and what the legal situation is. And Stephanie did the German bit for it, so on. So that was we hoped was a way of spreading the word, as Stephanie was saying. When she was first, we really need something, but also to spread the word between each other. So having it in the 3 languages was very important, that we could all learn about each other's situations because we're not so far away. We need to support each other.
Leslie, what is the name of the book, and can you show it again?
Oh, yes, it's called Learner Managed Learning and Home Education, A European Perspective. And it's published by Roland Meehan's Educational Heretics Press, which is now stopped publishing, but it's, and I edited it.
Wonderful. And we'll put links to all of that information on the website on the show notes page to make sure that if anybody wants to find that book, they can find it. I want to ask Alan, before we move forward a little bit, can you share with us some of the issues surrounding the home education movement as it pertains to Ireland?
Yeah, I've got some experience of that. Ireland is quite different from the from the UK. Although they inherited a similar education system. But in their constitution, in 1922, I think it was, home education was permitted. Children could be educated at school or at home. So it's in the Irish constitution. But still, when home education began, as we know, it began to grow, the 1970s, 80s, 90s, authorities really tried to stamp it out, really. And I got involved in a few court cases, one which went to the Supreme Court in Ireland at the time. And eventually we won that case, which was a bit of a landmark for us. And then there was another case that I had where they felt that the education the child was getting was not good enough. So it went. I put my report in. I wasn't able to appear in court, but I put my report in. And the judge, who was very, very nice, obviously a nice, kind fellow, said, "Well, what we'll do, we'll get the inspector, Irish primary education, the chief inspector, to come round and advise you how to home educate." So he turned up at this mother's house, and he had with him a book about that size, the Irish primary education curriculum. And he proceeded to instruct this woman on how to teach her son, and it included 20 minutes for physical education, 5-minute recess here, lessons with recesses, and then that's how it was at the time. But then law came in, and there was a lot of the home education group, the HEN it's called, the Home Education Network of Ireland. They lobbied the politicians, and they got it written into the guidelines that all kinds of home education were feasible, informal, formal, autonomous, whatever you wanted it to be. And those people had to register. And when they registered, the inspectors, the monitors, were trained to actually understand the informal kind of learning. So it all looked very, very good at the time. Since then, and this is the danger for England and Wales, I think, since then there's been this sort of movement away from the authorities to becoming more demanding of the parents that they see. There's one case there of a guy who's refused to register. You have to register. You can educate in the way you want, but you have to register. He's refused, and it's ended up his wife has gone to jail, and that's quite interesting too, because she was because she refused to pay the fine for not home educating. I'm not quite sure why the mother went to jail and not the father, but the mother was committed to jail. And they said they'd pick her up on the Monday morning to take her to jail, and they didn't turn up. So she phoned up the police and said, "Why haven't you come to take me to jail?" And obviously they were playing cat and mouse. They were thinking somebody would pay the fine and they wouldn't have to pick her up. So there are problems ongoing. And I think there's a warning there for countries where there's a danger. I didn't used to think this, but there's a danger of you can influence the authorities, but then when you have influenced them and things are fine, the things might change. That's the danger. And that's a danger for us in the UK as well.
I think it's really important to have conversations like this, especially for people that are in the United States or Australia, across the world, that are involved in the home education movement, that have no idea that these issues are even happening. So I'm really grateful that you're all here to share these particular stories and instances. I want to jump over to Stephanie next. And in addition to being well-versed as the issues happening in Germany, you also have some information to share with us about Austria and the Netherlands, where they're also facing some challenges and there are some changes. Would you like to share some of that information?
Yeah, sure. Well, the thing why I have all these information is actually through this TENHI, the European network. We have been talking to each other and keeping each other informed over the years of what's happening in our respective countries, and also sharing ideas. If a situation comes up, ideas. When your country was in that situation, what did you do? And just brainstorming together. So two countries have shared. I asked for the current situation in their countries. So one of them is the Netherlands. Peter van Zuidam has shared with me, because they had a situation in July 2013. The State Secretary for Education announced his intention to abolish the exemption from this compulsory schooling that they have in the Netherlands, and we were all like panic-stricken. Another country that's going to abolish the right to home educate. But actually, it's like Ellen said, you stay in contact with the authorities. So what's happened in the Netherlands is that in September 2014, he says the second chamber, that's the House of Representatives, discussed this intention with the person who brought this up, Mr. Decker himself. And then in that meeting room, it was filled with home educating families and their children. And none of the 8 MPs apparently who in the room agreed with the intention to abolish the exemption. And merely leave it at that. So that was positive. And then what the state secretary did was order a new consultation to inventorize the options to re-include education outside schools into the education system. So apparently this agency has now been assigned to investigate into that. And they sent out a questionnaire. And the NVVTO, which is the Dutch organization for home education, has also prepared a report, and this report is now, they're sharing the experiences with this agency, and this agency is going to report back to the Department of Education. So actually it seems like the home education organization is being asked for their opinion, for their experiences, and this is going to report back to the second chamber, and it's expected to decide on it before the Parliament summer recess. So we'll hope that something good will come of that. And then in Austria, they started also in 2013, because what they have to do in Austria, they also have a sort of exemption like the UK, where it says they have compulsory schooling, but you can be schooled in a school or at home. So that's the wording in their law. But at the end of the school year, you have to do a test, and what will be tested is what you usually would learn in that year that corresponds to your age, which doesn't really work well with autonomous learning. So there's a group of families that have formed what they call Initiative Freilernen 2013, so Initiative Home Education or Unschooling 2013, and they want to change that procedure, that the annual testing at the end of the year. So their children didn't do the tests last summer, and they will definitely not do the test this summer. Subsequently, they had to react to a lawsuit and took the issue to court. And recently, there has been a decision from the Federal Constitutional Court against one of the families' claim. But the current situation is that the group will continue to communicate with the Board of Education and the government to negotiate a solution for both parties and make unschooling an equal option of education in Austria. So they're working on that. And they have support from André Stern, who's one of the people also figuring in a recent film that I could speak about later too. And he is one of the oldest home educated people in Europe, maybe. And he talks about, he's from France, he grew up in France, has never been to school for a day. And he supports them, so he does talks in Austria for them, and the press and various political parties have stated their interest in this initiative and also in the talks that André gives in Austria. So yeah, the awareness is raising, and they hope that something good will come of that. And Karin, who shared this information with me, says we are most certain we can make a change and are positive to make a difference. So that's the communication from Austria.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So within Austria, Netherlands, Germany, and even the UK, my question goes to the panel. Is there solidarity between the unschoolers and the curriculum-based home educators? Do you find that they're supporting one another in fighting these issues, or are they separate battles?
Maybe if I can step in there. I don't think there's a clear line between unschoolers and or autonomous educators and people who use curriculums, because, as I said before, I think sometimes you can use a curriculum even if you're an unschooler, but because you're self-directed. So how I think what happened in the UK in 2009 was quite interesting, because there are two national organizations that claim to represent, well, they don't claim to represent, but they go over the whole country. So they have members from all over the country. Now, because they didn't claim to represent home educators, they didn't speak for them, the government found it very difficult to find a body that they could negotiate with. Unlike the situation in Europe, that seemed to work in our favor. So what happened was individuals picked up work. So they would write reports, or just small groups of home educators would write a report. There's a fantastic reply to Badman's report that was written very, very well researched. Now that was such a lot of work for those people. They dropped away. They couldn't do anymore. They were burnt out after that. But this report was so fantastic. We were able to run with it. And it was kind of like, I don't know, to put it crudely, a kind of guerrilla warfare, because the government weren't able to find us and negotiate, you know, some kind of conditions with us, because as soon as they talked to one person, another person would say, oh no, I'm not having that. So in a way, the fact that we were somewhat disunified and we had a lot of different, I'm sure, as you know, home educators are usually quite opinionated and have a lot to say about it and will defend it to the death. So, you know, but we also have a lot of variation amongst ourselves about what's the best tactics. But because each one of us, or not, you know, small groups of us were able to do the tactics that they thought were best, we were kind of poking the government constantly in all different ways and different you know, different strategies about how to go forward. And I actually think that this meant that we were stronger. So there was, they couldn't pick us off. They couldn't really find us. We did have a bit of luck too, but I'm not saying that this is always the way that you should approach government attacks, but it certainly wasn't. At the time, it seemed to be that we were weakened by the fact that we didn't have one strong group. But I actually think, in hindsight, it was a good defense. And I'm not sure, the situation in Germany and Holland and Austria is very different. So that would require a whole different set of tactics.
And Stephanie, in your opinion, is there solidarity among the unschoolers and the curriculum-based learners, or the folks that are, following a state-issued curriculum in these countries?
I don't really know. Yeah, well, I don't know if there's such a clear line. I would also say that some people might use a curriculum and just do what Ellen said, just do what you think suits your family. We've had, in Germany, we've had the situation that in the media, for example, 10 years ago, the view would be that homeschooling is something that only religious families do in order to keep their children out of school, so they don't learn about evolution. And that's what people thought of when there was an article about homeschooling. Or sometimes, often they would just picture home educators as weirdos at best. And we've seen a shift there. That recently we have more neutral and even positive or generally interested articles in the media. And so we're shifting away from that picture. But 10 years ago, definitely unschoolers were not really in the media, or the picture was that homeschooling was something that strictly Christian families did.
You brought up the shift of perception based on the media. Can you share with us a little bit about the recent film that came out called Being and Becoming last year, that was released last year, and it is a documentary, and I know this panel was involved, so maybe you can talk a little bit about what that did to help shift the public perception, which I think is very important, and maybe introduce the meaning and the success of the film.
Yeah, for us in Germany, the film was a blessing and a brilliant door opener. It's been released, or the first showing in Germany was actually in November last year, and only since January it's been in several small movie theaters. And but for us, it's the first time that, because it's talking about a form of education that is so different and so unknown in Germany. Obviously, when people watch the film, they have lots of questions, like, how can this be? How can you learn something if you don't go to school? So it raises a lot of questions. So what the movie theaters do is they invite home educators to come answer questions after the film, and it's the first time in Germany that we're actually invited to come and speak about home education. And share our experience. So that's just great for us. There's not very many people of us who actually go and do that, because many people are afraid to go public and speak about it publicly. But so we get to travel quite far to do that. But we have had great success. For example, in Stuttgart, there was one screening where there were over 100 people in the theater. And then in Pforzheim, about, I think, 3 weeks ago, they had a panel with 2 home educators and also 2 representatives from the school authorities. Obviously, when they were on the official panel in the discussion, everybody would state their point of view, and the school authorities also said that, like, they didn't budge from their opinion that every child has to go to school. But at the dinner afterwards, one of them said that seeing the film has definitely changed his perspective on home educators, and that is just such a blessing for us here in Germany.
And did any of the other panelists want to add anything about their experience and their hopes for the effects of the film Being and Becoming? Either Alan or Leslie, would you like to talk about what your experience was with that?
Yes, I saw it with my daughter, actually, and for me, it was everything I already knew, obviously, because of the research that I've been doing. But my daughter's, for her, it was an epiphany moment. Again, she thought it was fantastic. And I think it's a great introduction to autonomous, informal, unschooling, home education. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Alan, I want to ask you, why do you think the public perception about home education is important? Why do you think it matters?
Why do I think it matters? I think it's important. Yeah, this is going to be top of my head now. I think it's important because it is home educators they are the new educational scientists. It's not me has found this out, it's the parents and the children have found it out. They have discovered a way of learning that challenges, that gets up the nose of nearly every formal person in education. I say nearly, there are lots of people who will understand what's learning. In fact, when I meet people, whether they're academics or not, I get two kinds of responses. One is, how do they learn that? Shouldn't they be allowed to do this? One is, that's interesting, tell me more about it. So there are a lot of people who don't understand it but are interested. And I think there's a psychological thing there, but some people are more prone, some people are more rigid, and some people are less rigid. And the more rigid don't want to change anything. It's conservative, if you like, with a smee up like the Tory party, and they are much more flexible. I think that's got something to do with it. But going over the last two things, going over the last sort of 10, 15 years, as Leslie was saying, home education has grown massively. I'm moved by this. My grandson, he's out every day with a group of some sort every single day of the week. He's soon going to be saying, please can I stay for a day? And so the groups have grown so much so that it's become quite common. I've got home educators living 3 doors away from me. There's a family that came. Nearly everybody I meet knows somebody who knows somebody who home educates. So it is becoming much more common in this country. It already is in the States, I'm sure. The other thing I wanted to mention, on the other hand, there's a new group that's formed, a quasi-governmental, which is called the Association of Home Education Professionals. Now, for me, the home education professionals, they're professionals in right as far as education goes, because they're educating their children. In that sense, they are professionals. On this group, there is not a single home educator. They're made up of politicians. I think there's a lawyer on it who's interested in home education. There are some local authority. These are like the strong local who try to monitor home education on it. There's not a single home educator on it, although the two national home education groups asked if they could get somebody on it. So it's getting interesting, and there's more people doing it, and on the hand, there's this movement against it.
Yeah, I wonder if I can just add to what Alan said. I mean, while the numbers are growing, I feel in a way that autonomous education or unschooling is more under threat than ever. As I was saying before, when I started, there were people ahead of me on the road who were so important as someone to go and say, oh my God, what about maths? I mean, that was our call, cry every 2 or 3 months. Oh, we haven't done any maths. And they'd say, don't worry, it's okay. They learn maths when they're ready. You know, they don't learn it in this textbook. And you needed those people there to hold your hand throughout. And, you know, we've done that for other people, but you need a lot of those people for one or two home educators who are, you know, the numbers have to be, they need to, you need a lot of hugs and a lot of security to carry out this very different style of education, which you have no experience of. I mean, now that you've seen your children grow up and how wonderful and successful in every terms they are, you realize it was fine, it was great. But at the time, it's very, you know, this is the thing that you love most in the world, and everyone's saying, you're ruining them, you're going to, you know, they're going to be terrible and they'll never get a job and so on. And it's, you know, it's very frightening and worrying at times. Oh, it's also absolutely wonderful, and I would, you know, at other times. But not having those people ahead of you on the road, what's happening now is that there are so many people who are doing much more kind of private school at home. So when you go to a group and you say, oh, you know, we don't do anything, and everyone else is sitting in the circle going, oh, well, we do maths at this place, and we do swimming at the, you know, and you start to think, oh, well, I've heard about this other form of education, but maybe I'm not doing it right. And it's so quick to slip back into, there's so much influence on us in this tremendous traditional style, even though, of course, it's slightly different than school. You know, but you're still having that idea. You're not trusting that people will learn for themselves. You're not trusting that they will get to, you know, for me, education is about self-confidence and self-knowledge. It's not about the capital of anywhere or how you do quadratic equations. That you can learn in it, you know, now we've got the internet, you can learn that in a minute. You know, you go to YouTube and you can practically learn anything. So, but knowing who you are and what you want to do in your life, those are the hard questions. And you can only really know that by trying things out, working things through. And, you know, you do dinosaurs for a while and then, oh, I've done that now. And now I'm going over to, you know, some other Pokemon cards or something, you know. So this is a very delicate, very easily broken flower, this autonomous education. And parents need to be supported all the way through. And my worry is with these large numbers of people now going to, we have in London particularly, we have a lot of local groups. I mean, I'd say over 50 local groups all over London, big place too. But, and they're being, you know, there's a large proportion of the people in there who are just looking for the new classes and what is my child missing and, you know, where are we going to go to next? And, you know, it's such a different atmosphere from when I joined groups, which there aren't that many, but it was still, the atmosphere was, we're there ahead of you on the road and we'll hold your hand and it will be okay. So I fear for home education in the future. I don't fear for home education, I fear for autonomous education.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's really part of the reason why I'm doing this show. I am very concerned. I'm a traveling unschooler, which puts us in a class of our own. And there's not a whole lot of community surrounding what we're doing in terms of there are people that want to do what we're doing, but there's not a community of people doing what we're doing. And I see the tremendous value in the work that you're doing in Europe and you know, creating a network of support and community. It's so necessary. It is so necessary. So I honor the work that you're doing. The last question that I have for this panel, which is kind of what Leslie answered, is why is this work so important? And why is it important to be able to advocate for autonomous learning or unschooling? And I'd like to jump back to Leslie. Why don't you go ahead and finish, because this is more of the same of your thought that you were just talking about, and then I'll jump to the rest of the panel with that.
Well, you know, I've learned so much through home educating my kids. I think it was my journey, not theirs. You know, when you see under fives, as Alan was saying before, you don't need to teach them how to learn. I mean, we are learning creatures. We just soak up all the time, you know, and we don't stop at 18 or 16 or whenever we leave school. I mean, hopefully we keep our minds open and we learn throughout our lives. the greatest gift for me was to learn to see how, if we don't get in the way of that process, that young people are just, sponges and to see them developing and flowering, I find to be such a treasure and a humbling experience. It helps me learn and helps me have my relationships to other people in society. And I think a lot of our problems are caused by us being apart from each other and being regimented and being seen as not good enough all the time. So we're always sort of on the back foot. This is putting it very colloquial, but we're frightened and we're insecure and we don't try and we don't get in there. And then have this experience with particularly the two people that I was mother to, opened my eyes to how rich and successful and creative life can be.
Well said, well said. Thank you, Leslie. And Alan, why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts as to why this work is important?
Let's go back first to something Leslie was saying. There's an increasing move towards home educators in the UK becoming possibly more formal. On a positive note, in my research, what I found is children be very good at resisting formal education at home. And they are the ones who are often move their parents in the right direction. I've got lots and lots of examples of that. The mother starting to teach her child to read and it ends in tears. And the mother withdraws. I think Leslie was saying something like that. That's a very common thing. Another example is a mother who took her child out of school because he wasn't learning in school. He was refusing to. He wasn't doing anything, but he wasn't falling backwards. She took him out, and then she gave him a job. And after 2 weeks, where he did everything that she wanted him to do, school type work, he then suddenly stopped. And she says, "I've given my job for you." So she started to devise sort of activities for him, and in the end, she started to pay him to do maths. And that worked for about a week, and then that didn't work. And then one day she took him down to Westminster Abbey for historical purposes, to history lesson. And she took him into the Abbey, and the man who was on duty said, Are you interested in history, are you? And he said, "No, my mother is." In the end, cut a long story short, it took me a year to give up. And when I stood back, then he flowered. And that I think says it all. But children have their own way of influencing the way they're taught. And if they're happy to be taught formally, then who's going to argue with that? But generally, they do move their parents away from anything formal. I find it's very gratifying. Children have their own theory of learning, and it's better than that the adults have.
And that is the perfect reason why this work is important. That illustrates it perfectly. Thank you, Alan. And Steffi, why don't you go ahead and share with us why you believe this is important work to do?
Well, I don't even know what to add. Leslie also put it so perfectly. But I think, like Dale Carnegie says, that people are rarely successful in something when they're not enjoying what they're doing. And I think it's just such a joy to see how much kids can enjoy learning and growing and developing when they're learning in a way, or when they're busy doing something that they're really interested in at that moment. And so I just want to, I would like to have everybody to have that opportunity. I wouldn't want to shut down schools or something, but just to have the choice that if school is not working for you, or if you're suffering in school, or if it's just not giving you the opportunity to develop in a way that you'd like to, that there is a choice and that you can choose another path, even though it's not very common in where you live. So I think that would be important.
And also important not to make a choice because something didn't work, but to make a choice, as a family, that this is the right decision for your family, because autonomous learning is indeed a family activity. It's not just one person autonomously going out into the world. As was talked about early on in this panel, it's a facilitated active learning, so everybody's involved. So I totally agree. I can't believe how quickly the 2 hours have completely flown by. This has been an incredible panel, and I personally have learned so much about homeschooling issues and unschooling issues in Europe, and I'm so grateful you've all agreed to come onto this panel and share your insights and your knowledge with us. So thank you. Let's go around to each of the panelists, and I'd like to give you all an opportunity to share the projects that you're working on, make any final statements, or share your websites, whatever you'd like to share at this point. The floor is yours. And let's go back to you, Stephanie.
Okay, well, the two projects maybe I'm working, or maybe three even, I'm working on most right now is one of them is doing the podium discussions after the film Being and Becoming, and we'll see how long it will be shown in different movie theaters. So far we have several days where we're going over the next few weeks. And also there's a book I'm compiling with three other editors, and we've gotten accounts, wonderful stories where families from Germany and Austria and Switzerland share their story, how they got into home education, and how home education looks like in their house, and what that brought to their family life. And there's such a wealth of experience there in the stories that people are sharing with us. And I hope that will inspire other families to find their own paths. And they're so diverse. I really look forward. We're editing the text that we're getting right now. I so look forward to seeing that book on the market. Yeah, and then we're doing a lot of work on the website I shared before, the Schulfrei community, and just hoping that will grow and bring home educators from all over Europe, or even the world, together even more. And I also wanted, what I forgot to say earlier, to invite everybody to the Schulfrei Festival. The Schulfrei Festival, yeah, Lainey too, 2015 is going to be from September 17th to 20th. So that's 4 days of celebrating freedom of education in Germany, and we would like to invite everybody to come. Well, maybe not everybody at once, but it would be great to have home educators from other countries also share the joy of home education with us during those 4 days.
Thank you, and we'll put all of those links on the show notes page for this particular show, so we'll link to everything. Let's jump back over to Alan. Alan, why don't you share with us your projects, a little bit about your research, your books, and anything else that is that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I've been doing research now for must be about 20 years since first interviewed Leslie, actually, as part of the research. And I've published a few books. And on a European dimension, our first book was translated into German, Bildung zu Haus, I think it's called in German. And our recent book, which I think you've got mention of, is How to Learn at Home. That's been translated to French, and there's a German translation coming out soon. The next piece of research, following on the autonomous line, the unschooling line, is in how children learn to read at home. We don't know how they learn to read at home, so all we can do is find out from parents how your children learn to read at home. And we've got a total sample of about just under 300 families. So we're looking at 700 children. And what's coming out of this is that, again, there's the whole spectrum from phonics to he's learned to read, she learned to read, and I don't know, and everything in between. And even the ones who are very formal, again, are saying, when I think that he learned to read more when I wasn't teaching them than when I was teaching them. So it's a really fascinating thing, and it fits into our sort of our research into informal learning. And the more we get into it, the less we understand. And the only theory we can think of, we've got a theory, complexity theory. That says it then. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And I think the theme of the learning portion, everybody has mentioned what we've learned as adults and parents is the best thing we can do is get out of the way. So I think everybody's mentioned that in one way or another. So yeah, it's amazing. We'll go ahead and list your projects on the website on the show notes page as well. And it was a true pleasure to meet you and have you on this panel. And let's jump on over to Leslie. Leslie, I'm so excited to hear your final thoughts and hear about what you have coming up in the future and what you're working on.
Well, after my research in 2008, I've been publishing regularly articles and things. I think it's very important to try and reduce the prejudice around home education and tell people that there are many other ways to learn. So, you know, Alan's doing a fantastic job, but there is I'm an editor on a journal called Other Education, which is an online journal of alternative education, but it's quite academic. And there's going to be, I have an article coming out in a book that Paula Rothermel, who was one of the early academics working on home education in the UK, she's edited, called International Perspectives on Home Education, which again is from around the home educators from around the world, which is great. Personally, I'm very involved in the Otherwise Club, which is a community centre for home educators based in central London. I couldn't do without having my feet on the floor, meeting some kids every week, and we run lots of projects, but it doesn't give me a lot of time for writing. So if people want to know more about that, please get in touch through the otherwiseclub.org.uk website, and also some of my research is up on that website as well, but contact me if they want to read more. I can send it to me.
Great, we'll do, and like I said, we'll put those links on the website. Well, thank you. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have met everybody here, and I just wanted to say, wherever you are and whatever it is that you do, continue doing it always for the love of learning.